hanging out in phys ed. Same old thing we did last week. Not a thing to do but throw dodgeballs at you. That's not all right. That's not all right. Hello, Brian!
When I hear the term physical education, I think about a positive environment where you can be physically active. My experiences in physical education when I was in school were actually really great. They were great in the sense that I enjoyed what we did in them. When I was in elementary school, I remember playing many cooperative games that often involved throwing and catching a ball with other students, or relay games that involved working together. As I got older, we started to play more sports and physical education both indoors and outdoors. Throughout grades 7, 8, and 9, we did lots of fitness tests and 12-minute runs. This is when I really started to see the fitness side of phys ed rather than just playing games and sports in every class. Throughout grades 7 to 12, we did workouts in the weight room a few times a month in phys ed. I always enjoyed being in the weight room because I enjoy working out, and with everyone being in there together, it gave me motivation to work hard and keep pushing. Once I got into grade 9, we started doing the beep test instead of the 12-minute run. I really enjoyed working on fitness in phys ed because I enjoy being active with my friends, so this was a perfect opportunity. Once I got into grade 10, phys ed changed for a lot of people. Many of the girls in my class hated coming to gym class because they hated being active and they didn't like to sweat. I always tried my best to make the class fun for them because the only reason they were there was because they had to be. There were only a few of us girls who actually wanted to be there and be active, so we seemed to go and join the boys a lot of the time. In grade 11 and 12, phys ed was a lot more fun because it was a class full of students who actually wanted to be there. This made all the activities we did in class fun learning experiences for everyone. It also allowed me to become closer with some of the students who I don't normally hang out with because we had a lot of the same interests in phys ed. My experiences in phys ed have been wonderful, and I believe that this is because of the teachers I had. All my phys ed teachers had a passion of being active. They would get involved in the activity and they showed interest, which made it fun for everyone. When we got older and would change clothes for phys ed class, our teachers would change too, and I think that's what helped those kids who didn't want to be there put in a little bit of effort because our teacher would do it with us.
Unlike Gina, I didn't have that enjoyable of a phys ed experience. I don't recall my elementary experiences in phys ed, but I do remember how I felt when taking phys ed in middle years. I was an athletic kid in high school. I played plenty of sports and did well in them. Although I played a lot of sports, all of the sports I played were team sports where my teammates and I could put our skills together and collaborate with one another. I was never an individual sports person. I remember enjoying phys ed so much when we were playing games or learning about new games, but I can remember the anxiety I felt when it came to doing fitness testing. I absolutely hated being put on the spot and getting tested in front of my class. The beep tests in my class were just a competition with everyone trying to get the highest level. Or we would get marked on how high we could jump or how many sit-ups we can do in front of everyone. I just remember sitting in the change room before getting tested, trying to think of different ways and excuses that I could get out of phys ed class for the day.
I mean, my phys ed experiences were mostly positive, from kindergarten to grade 7 anyway. In those years, I was a very active kid who knew how to throw a ball, which served me well since we simulated sports a lot and, of course, played dodgeball. But when I got to grade 7, a rapid growth spurt left me with severely decreased lung capacity and structural problems in my knees. My phys ed teacher heard about these health problems, and even though I played on every team I could, he wouldn't let me participate in phys ed class. This, coupled with trying to figure out how to move legs that all of a sudden had 3 extra inches on them in a coordinated fashion, left me with apathetic feelings of phys ed. These feelings carried through into grade 8, 9, and 10, and I knew that whenever I didn't want to participate, I could cite my lungs or knee as an excuse and teachers would believe me. Even if I sat out of phys ed because of my lungs but played a basketball game that night, the teachers didn't seem to care whether I participated or not. I was like the girls that Gina talked about. I stopped giving it my all unless we were playing basketball or baseball, which were my sports, and still came out with a 90% for the class. As soon as I was finished Wellness 10, I was finished my physical education in high school.
When I was younger, my experiences with physical education were really good. I always enjoyed being in the gymnasium. I played a lot of sports. I did track and field. I was competitive and I enjoyed doing these things because I was good at it. But I also saw how these experiences were for other students in my class, and they were most of the time negative, and I saw how much stress it put on those other people and how the teacher made them feel, and it was always negative. So going into being a teacher, I was unsure how to change it and how I could make it better. I now find myself frustrated when I see teachers continuing the cycle of chaotic 30-minute periods where children butcher seasonal sports because they have not been shown proper movements or techniques, nor have they been exposed to proper levels of control or utilization. These movements take time to master, depending on a child's developmental and cognitive ability, as well as the teacher's effort to implement these skills. My personal beliefs about the importance of physical education have grown immensely.
At the beginning of EPE, I was interested to learn about teaching phys ed. I always liked phys ed and had a positive, engaging phys ed experience. I was, however, naive about the ideas that phys ed is a subject to be put in the back of your mind and that it is less important. I wasn't thinking that phys ed isn't important at all or that I would never plan for it properly, but I've become much more passionate about the idea of having well-planned fundamental phys ed lessons.
The personal beliefs that I have about physical education will not be the opinion of every teacher I know. Therefore, with each group of students I will one day influence, I must model and educate physical literacy, which include a variety of things such as the fundamental movement skills, positive attitude about yourself and others. At first, children won't be able to say, "I can do this," but they can at least say, "I can try."
I agree, Kale. Before EPE, I wasn't thinking critically or realizing the ineffectiveness of several teachers I have seen having students skip phys ed to do other work or having their lesson plan be students run until they get tired or just play tag forever. Brian's point about having physically literate children contributing to overall personal health and life skills really struck me that phys ed is equally as important as having children reading and writing. Before EPE, I didn't have a strong understanding of the phys ed curriculum. I was not aware of the 26 fundamental movement skills. Knowing now that those exist and are part of the main focus in the phys ed curriculum, I feel better prepared to teach effective phys ed classes.
I've learned that phys ed games and picking teams can be done in an equal way. But what about incorporating healthy competition?
Yeah, let's talk about competition for a minute. I don't believe that we can or should completely eliminate competition from our children's lives. As grown-ups, we see people apply for jobs and not get them all the time. So why would we take away competition from our children? They need to learn how to win and lose. Children need to learn that they aren't always going to win in life, and if we don't teach them that at a young age, we are just setting them up for disappointment in their futures. We need to teach our children that it's okay to win and it's okay to lose. So let's talk about winning for a minute. Children need to learn how to be humble winners. They don't need to brag about it to their friends, and they don't need to rub it in other people's faces when the other team loses. At the same time, we need to teach our children to be humble losers. You don't need to whine or pout when you lose. It's a part of life. Competition is a part of our lives, and I think that it's important that we teach our children how to be winners and losers properly.
Well, when I was doing an assignment for EPE, I had to look at the grade 3 curriculum, and there is an outcome 3.8 that says you have to demonstrate positive interactions with others in cooperative and competitive movement activities. One of the indicators happens to be responding positively to challenges, successes, and losses while participating in movement activities. So I think it is important that we teach our kids how to properly handle competition.
This course has taught me how important it is to have a positive focus and engagement in physical education because students will be influenced by my actions and feelings towards physical activity. I want to get involved, participate in the class, and model the activity for students. If I do the activity, it promotes them to do it and makes it much more likely that they will participate.
I agree, Carmen. I think it's important to be a role model to your students. It is important to model what we're expecting of them, and when we're modeling these activities, it is important to be good role models and to be dressed appropriately for the phys ed class.
Yeah, I want to be the kind of teacher who gets involved in the class and doesn't just sit there telling the students what to do. It inspires children to do their best when their teacher is doing the same thing as them.
Modeling what you want students to do is an important component to physical education, not only instructing something that you want them to do and just watching them. I would not personally do this with students. I think it's important to model proper technique, skill, and movements so that students can visually observe what their job is and what it should look like. It's important to model positive self-appreciation and confidence because children will not be proficient at every movement skill from the very beginning. They must learn how to be patient and to acknowledge that with effort and practice, there will be growth in their movement skills.
One thing I remember from EPE is how Brian would change when we went to the gym. He also said, "I would never have you do something that I wouldn't do." I think that's so important. In elementary school, it works well to model what you want done, but it also gets rid of that apprehension on the part of the students. Getting into higher grades, it shows the students that you really care about the class. I can hardly remember a teacher of mine who changed and played. They mostly sat in a chair that we dubbed the teacher chair. It didn't do much to foster excitement. We need to show that we care before we can expect the students to care.
In this class, we were also able to dig deeper into the physical education curriculum. We first looked at the three main goals, which are active living, skillful movement, and relationships, as well as learn about the fundamental movement skills, which are the skills that students need to develop to establish for the foundation of sports and physical activities.
I feel confident in teaching phys ed now that I've learned the fundamental movement skills. I know what skills to incorporate so students can become confident in those movement variables and become skillful movers. Learning the fundamental movement skills also taught me how students will progress to control and utilization of a skill throughout several grades. Therefore, it is not necessary for children to be taught a skill and be expected to perform it accurately right away.
I truly see how significant it is to introduce these skills to children early on in their lives. In order to live an active, healthy lifestyle, the concepts of physical literacy must be taught in the first few years of a child's life. If it is not, the child could lack routine in healthy activity. If we don't do these things at a young age, it's possible that these children will not have a lifelong journey of physical activity. I've also learned that these fundamental movement skills can connect to other outcomes, to make every day incorporating fun, intriguing, and memorable content.
Through this EPE class, I've started to see how we can use fundamental movement skills not only in phys ed, but in different points throughout our other subject areas.
It's important that we incorporate the 26 fundamental movement skills in our physical education lesson. An easy way you could do this would be to set up different stations and have the students circuit through them. The stations could include tossing a ball into a hoop, throwing a frisbee, serving a birdie with a badminton racket, practicing throwing and catching a ball, hitting a balloon with a tennis racket using control, using the scoops and wiffle balls, and using a ping pong paddle to hit a fluff ball with. There are so many ways you can incorporate the fundamental movement skills into phys ed class. Students are always practicing these skills and they don't even realize it.
For example, in my 3-week block, I'm teaching science, the human body. I took up a bunch of questions and made a reflection for the kids to listen to the question and answer. And after each question, we had to do a movement that included balancing, hopping, locomotor movements, and ones that were at a medium, high, and low level.
I have learned that teaching students to be aware of personal space and general space around them is a key learning early on to have a safe phys ed class. When students have the ability to move safely in the space provided, they will further develop the skills of deking around objects, hand-eye coordination, and also spatial orientation.
Another thing that I've learned from this class is teaching games for understanding. Teaching games for understanding is a game-centered approach which allows students to learn their tactical skills through the games that they play instead of teaching how before the game begins. The categories that TGFU is set up in is invasion, striking, fielding, target, and net wall.
I love sports, so I love TGFU. I want to give my students a sampling of many sports so that they can make a decision about what sport, if any, they want to play later on in life. Using TGFU introduces sports in an age-appropriate way. They get the basics, but they can move toward the sport when they are physically able to execute the skills. I learned about TGFU in KHS 233, and I think it's one of the most valuable textbooks I have. Doing the games assessment proved that they can hit most indicators. I feel that many of my units will be TGFU based.
After taking this class, I can see how using TGFU games and just manipulating and adapting them to each grade level will influence and enhance students' progressions with skills and movement. A new game does not need to be introduced every phys ed class, nor should the same game be played every day. Gradually adapt the game as students develop each skill to a utilization level. This way, students are developing the full skill from the game in an engaging, new way, rather than playing and practicing it once and then forgetting about it.
Physical education games and picking teams can be done in an equal way. Games can be adapted to ensure students are concentrating on one movement or more than one, and a task at all times and don't have to be out or bored during this time.
Activities need to be chosen carefully with a specific learning or skill focus. Activities should be planned to have students constantly moving and developing. Games that cause children to be eliminated and then sit out are ineffective and do not promote physical literacy. Students can perform some sort of physical movement in any game rather than being taken out of the game for a prolonged period of time.
I agree, Carmen. Participation is huge in phys ed. It is also very important to make sure that all students are participating in all the activities. Therefore, it is important to play activities that everyone is involved and doesn't have anyone sitting out or waiting a turn. It is important to have students fully participating in all activities at all times.
I think it's important that we, as educators, create a positive environment for students to learn in. This extends from the classroom into the gym. Cooperative learning activities are great for students to learn to work together. I remember doing lots of these activities when I was younger. There was always the famous get the mats from one end of the gym to the other without any students touching the floor. I also remember doing the activity where you had a whole bunch of items you had to transport from one end to the other, but only one student was allowed to be touching the floor and all the students had to make it to the other end.
It is important to recognize that students will need positive encouragement during physical activity and need to be given appropriate, skillful tasks to support physical growth. I need to be aware that physical activity can cause some students to be insecure and that they will want to avoid physical activity. Prepare a class in a way that has students so busy no one has time or wants to pay attention to what anyone else looks like playing the game or activity.
For sure, it is very important to encourage students. Encouraging students will allow them to work harder and let them know that you believe in them.
Purposeful activities focusing on the what, how, and why of being active, moving skillfully, and building strong relationships also needs to be recognized and carried out. I learned through reading the curriculum that students who develop a deeper understanding in these areas while participating in physical education will be more willing and able to engage in active living throughout life.
The most important thing I took from this class is the importance of relationships in your class. I believe it's important for your class to have strong relationships with each other, which will overall lead to the students feeling confident and equal in the classroom. This will allow students to not be afraid to make mistakes in phys ed or try something new in front of the class if they have a safe and healthy learning environment. Furthermore, I believe that this will lead to cooperation. Students will have strong relationships, will be more willing to cooperate with one another and help each other out in phys ed class. I also think it's important for teachers to understand that students may get anxious when it comes to phys ed because it may take them out of their comfort zone. Therefore, by building relationships with your students, you'll be able to identify the students who are more worried about how they look or feel in the phys ed class. And when you know this, it is important to not put these students on the spot or make them do something that may make them feel uncomfortable, as it may turn them away from phys ed as a whole. It is important to ask students if they are comfortable demonstrating or to ask for volunteers before putting someone on the spot.
Establishing relationships with students is key if you want to get them motivated for physical activity. If you know your students' abilities and their limits, planning and engaging will come much easier. Students have to know that their teacher cares about them. We as teachers must remember to express proudness and gratitude for the effort our students give, in conjunction to the times we critique their progress.
In my opinion, relationships are some of the most important things we work on in school. In trying to make phys ed a safe and encouraging place, we need to work on relationships in the gym. Employing different ways of picking teams, having students so engaged they can't see what the other kids are doing, will help alleviate teasing and laughing. But we, especially as elementary teachers, need to teach skills like teamwork and winning graciously to help foster relationships. If there are only positive interactions in phys ed, then they will help with only positive relationships.
Students should be getting 60 minutes of physical activity daily. Some schools will only allow your class to be in the gym for 3 days a week. Therefore, I think it's important to be flexible by using different spaces for phys ed or doing different activities in the classroom, which will allow students to meet the requirement of 60 minutes of physical activity a day.
I think as a phys ed teacher, it's important that we ourselves work on fitness and healthy eating. we are teaching our children about being healthy, physically active human beings, then we better be these people as well. Otherwise, we become hypocrites.
In addition to positive role modeling, it is important to express the purpose and relativity for each activity to what the students are doing and to how it will impact their life. In order to achieve participation from all students, children have to know that they are working for their own physical and cognitive growth. If they think that instruction for movement is solely to impress the teacher, they may refrain from using their own full potential. In the class, we must also talk about the importance of healthy eating and a healthy lifestyle. Students can be a part of the planning during this process. Ask students what they know, what and how they would like to improve their health and increase their physical activity. I want to remember that as a teacher, I have a significant influence on my students, but I must consider that the capabilities of my individual students are just as strong. Let's get them involved in their learning of physical literacy.
We've heard from our classmates, both when we were in K-12 and in university, that the gym can be a terrifying place. It is our job to keep the positive attitudes up. We need to celebrate all successes, even the small ones. However, I do think there is a fine line between being positive and being fake. Brian kept the positivity up in our class by being excited and energetic. Kids know when they aren't as good at certain things as other kids, and having us celebrate a trivial skill when other kids are excelling can make them feel even more embarrassed.
I believe it's important to make your phys ed lessons fun and engaging. This will allow students to enjoy what they are doing and become successful. It is important to remember that students will find success based on their own skills, and that everyone's success may look different.
I believe that encouragement and being a role model goes hand in hand with participation. If we show students that we value phys ed and make the gym a caring place, students will be more apt to participate. I think one of the most important things about participation is understanding why students do not participate. I believe that private one-on-one discussion should happen with students who are sitting out to get to the reason why they aren't playing. Obviously, if they have a cast on their arm or are on crutches, you can guess pretty easily why they aren't participating. But if a child complains of a stomach ache 3 classes in a row, I think it is our job to figure out if they truly are sick or if there's another reason that they don't want to participate.
As a future educator, I think it's very important to connect and collaborate with other teachers, professionals, or other resources that you may be able to. These people may have some great ideas or strategies that you can use in your phys ed class. It is also important to collaborate with other staff members.
Connecting and collaborating is great. I think that as a teacher, it's important that we realize that our colleagues are there to help us. Getting to know the people we are working with will make teaching easier, especially if you're able to share lessons with each other. Rachel and I are in a school where they co-teach primary phys ed, and it's really neat to see how the 2 teachers work together in the gym. There are 2 classes in there at the same time, but they teach it together as one big class.
One of the teachers is a young man who has a very tough love way of teaching, while the other is an older woman who uses soft voices and gestures. Collaboration can be great, but these 2 don't always see eye to eye. Kids can pick up on this and often favor the male teacher.
As a future phys ed teacher, I plan to use resources available to me, such as our fundamental movement skills package we completed for this class, to find great plans for a phys ed class that will adhere to the curriculum. I want to and will teach for understanding and skillful movement through participation in a large variety of movement activities that are facilitated in a fair, safe, and enjoyable way. I fully intend to promote physical literacy with my students by having a positive mindset about physical education.
So what does this all mean to me as a future teacher? I must prepare and plan for engaging and purposeful activities in physical education. This subject must be taken just as seriously as the other academic subject areas. Each lesson should integrate various fundamental movement skills that correspond to the curriculum outcomes.
This class has taught me a lot about being an intuitive and sensitive phys ed teacher. I know now where I can find resources that will help me teach a class that focuses on movement skills, physical literacy, and teaching for understanding. I feel more prepared to provide worthwhile phys ed classes that will promote health literacy in my students.